Go ahead. Ready.
Okay, I'm calling to order the Communications and Water. I'm calling to order the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee of the Board of Directors for Marin Water for February 16th, 2022. Our first order of business is to call the roll.
Director Bragman,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
Director Russell, Vice Chair Gibson,
Here.
and Chair Kohler.
I'm here. We are now going, I now need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on the agenda, Terry?
There are none.
Okay, can we have, oh, sorry, do we have any board comment on the agenda? Okay, then we can call the roll.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell, Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. It is now the time for public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Do we have any comments?
There are none.
Okay, we're going to move on to the regular calendar. The first order of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting in November. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on this item, Terry?
There are none.
Then I need a roll call vote.
Director Bragman.
I wasn't there, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Chair Gibson, I'm
Aye.
sorry, Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Okay, the water efficiency update.
Good evening, board. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. Let me pull my PowerPoint up here. All right. Jumping right into it. Starting with an overview, we're going to look at the drought initiatives and the programs that we are offering during the drought. Take a quick look at some water use statistics, and then move into discussing long-term initiatives and finally wrapping up with next steps. So starting with the Flume Smart Home Water Monitor program, we have a contract in place for 2,800 devices, and 2,500 of those have been redeemed. 2,000 have been installed, and almost 2,000 are active. And so, you know, the way it works is it gets mailed to the customer, they install it, and then that activates it. And sometimes there's a disconnect between the reader, and that's why there's fewer active than installed. But so very impressive program, and we can continue to see active participation in it, which is great. The district contribution for this program has shifted. In 2021, it was $115 per device that the district contributed. It's dropped down to $75, and that's because Flume has adjusted their price point. So they've actually reduced their price. So we're the consumer or customers are paying the same amount, the $50, and our price has dropped slightly. Flume participation has really helped our customers identify leaks and really understand their water use, led to a detailed understanding of water use in the service area for us, and also played an important role of understanding water use nationally, right? Because Flume kind of compiles all this information to understand grander trends. This graph here shows the October water use. You can see for our Flume devices, GPCD, you can see that significant drop when we got that rainfall in October. Moving on to the Laundry to Landscape program. We currently have a partnership with the Urban Farmer Store, right, where they offer the webinars under contract with us for free to our customers. And we provide a $125 discount on Laundry to Landscape kits. So these are your, gray water Laundry to Landscape kits. Impressive number of participants in those webinars at 500 folks across the 8 webinars for the last year or so, 18 months or so. Those 500 customers who have attended have only resulted in 46 kits being purchased, which also forces us to kind of look at, well, what's going on there. So changes on this program, I think we'll see moving forward. And only 19 customers had participated in our prior program, right? So we had an incentive program for laundry to landscape for years prior to the drought. And so this new system has definitely seen an improvement, meaning the webinar and the partnership with the Urban Farmer Store seen an improvement in participation, but it's still somewhat lackluster. One of the barriers we found is that finding installers, right? And so we're working with the Urban Farmer Store to have them potentially do some installer trainings. And that we think will help increase participation in not only our rebates, but implementation of these types of programs.
Harry, if I can interrupt you just to ask this, on
Of course.
those kinds of numbers, are you seeing a diminishing in the last few months? Are they going down? Are they still on the upscale?
Director Gibson, it's month over month, it varies, right? So one month we may see 2, the next month we see 7, the next month 1, the next month 10. So it's throughout the this entire drought period, we've seen somewhat of a fluctuation, but it's a fairly short time period. So we'll continue to track that and see, where else there are opportunities.
So you're not necessarily seeing a diminishing in these months where we have full reservoirs.
No, not necessarily. And the same with rain barrels. Actually, you'd think it does make sense that folks are starting to consider and install more rain barrels this time of year because they have seen the bit of rain we've received, right? And there's an opportunity to capture. So similar to gray water, some numbers on our rainwater harvesting program. We've seen an increased level of participation.
Harry, I'm sorry, can you go
go
back for just a second?
Yeah.
Because I think the point about the installers is very, very significant. I did a project years ago now, probably 6 years ago with the county to, and I don't know if you may have been involved in that when you were at Sonoma, to through the Quell program to train landscapers to do laundry to landscape, because doing it requires both a plumber and a landscaper. So my question to you is, and we found way back then that most people are not that interested in the do-it-yourself approach. I mean, there are going to be some, and Daily Acts up in Sonoma is amazing at doing those trainings, but they've had a lot of success. I assume you're really familiar with them. They've had a lot of success because they're just on it all the time with these trainings. So I guess my question to you is, do you see this sort of, as I think you put it, lackluster interest? How much do you think that that's connected to the challenges with finding people to actually do these? I mean, they're relatively simple installations, but most of us don't want to be messing around with our plumbing. And is there an opportunity for the district to be working with Daily Acts or somebody else, with Quell, with the landscape organizations, to be doing more of these trainings so that it's not such a big problem finding somebody?
Yeah, I think that is, we did a survey for the participants of the webinars when it was about 350 folks who had participated in the webinars. And that was one of the comments we received back, was finding an installer. Another was, while they were interested in learning more about gray water, it's not meant for everyone, right? There are maintenance,
right.
Not necessarily, I don't want to say challenges, but you just have to maintain the system. You can't just install it and walk away like many devices. And so
Right.
it takes a certain installation. But having an installer definitely having folks who can install would remove one of those barriers. And so we're going to pursue that as our next kind of initiative. Absolutely. We have a relationship with the Urban Farmer Store. A lot of folks go there within our community. So we're going to start there, and we can always build off that with, like you said, Quell trainings or Daily Acts, and even CLCA and other landscape focus organizations, and then also pulling in the plumber side, because it does take both components to have it done, knowledge of both components to have it done properly.
Thank you.
So moving on to rainwater harvesting program, we have seen an increased level in participation. Again, we had this program prior to the drought, and you can see the figures there of how much participation we've seen. And just in 22, our calendar year 2022 so far, we've had 22 installations, which is great, right? We're seeing with that bit of rain, like I said, folks are starting to install these systems and see the value there. Potentially, the recycle water fill station could provide an opportunity for year-round use of these cisterns, and there are some barriers that staff is working through on establishing what that might look like. So more to come there. Sonoma Water, right, one of our wholesaler, has a regional program that's under development. They received some grant funding. They're looking at training professionals to install rainwater harvesting systems and also establishing a regional rebate. So the grant funding is just coming into play. They're really working on the details now. So more to come, but there might be either an opportunity to sweeten the deal as far as adding on to our rebate or potentially shifting to their program depending on how robust it is and what opportunities might arise. Moving on to our turf programs. Had 570 customers approved for turf removal, which equates to over 500,000 square feet. We've had 340 projects that have been complete, meaning when they've been deemed complete, that means the pre-inspection, post-inspection, and the check has been cut. So the incentive has been issued, which is great, which leaves about 200,000 or so square feet that still remains. And we'll talk about the finances on that in a moment. Our focus for 2022 is on replanting, right? Recognizing that during the drought, we were discouraging replanting these areas because, the amount of water needed to establish new planting material wasn't something we had available necessarily at that time. And so now we do. And now we want to start providing resources for customers to understand what should be going in. And when Adrienne gives her presentation, she'll go into a bit more detail on what these resources that we've developed look like.
But to be clear, you're not talking about having people replant high water use.
No, thank you.
Okay, I just want to be clear. We're not going back. We're going forward.
No.
So if you could just talk a little bit about what you mean by replanting. You're talking about replanting with low water.
All low water plant material, right? No overhead spray. We want to make sure that, so during the drought as part of our program, we did have them abandon their irrigation system. So at this point, they don't have overhead spray, which is great, right? Because you can change the plant material, and if you have the same irrigation system, you're not going to achieve the same water savings. So having them transition to drip, having them transition to low water use plant material, specifically in promoting natives, right? We want to have drought resilient landscapes, especially as part of this replanting. In addition, we have folks who may not have taken advantage of our rebate, but have a dead lawn or a struggling lawn that they may be interested in replacing with locally appropriate low water use plant material. So whole lots of resources that are coming and being built around that.
So Carrie, before you go on, this is pretty impressive. The number of square foot footage replaced. Do you have goals that you've established for the conservation group around either number of projects or square foot, whatever the metric is? Do you have performance goals that you're trying to achieve, that you're working towards?
Well, during the drought, right, the board had established performance goals of 400,000 square feet a month. And at this point, we are working through those customers and we have not established new goals, right? We're still still have 200 that projects we're working through, and we get new customers all the time, right? New applications are constantly coming in. And so balancing that out, it was only 6-7 months that we had this program in place. So it was an incredible upswing in participation, and tracking that and, deeming what's realistic as we move forward is going to be really important, but we have not talked about or established planting or, goals for this program and turf replacement.
Okay, thanks.
We do have some program changes, which I'll cover on the next slide. I just want to mention them here. And finally, the direct install program, while it was popular, this was our direct install program with Conservation for the North Bay. It was time intensive, expensive, and only accounted for 50,000 square feet of the total. And so we'll talk about that in a moment as well, in a bit more detail. So consideration of program modifications. We are proposing extending the approval period. So during the drought, we reduced the approval period because we wanted to expedite the program, right? We wanted to get those water savings. We didn't want our customers to kind of drag out the decision. We wanted to prompt them and encourage them to take immediate action. Now we're in a slightly different space, and so we want them to be able to plan for their project accordingly. We'd also like to reintroduce the 50% plant coverage requirement, which would require planting with low water use plants. This was part of our program prior to the drought when we were offering $1 a square foot. It's very common for turf incentive programs to require plant coverage, certain amount of plants to be replanted, because what we don't want to do is have our customers sheet mulch or put mulch down and then just scrape it and roll out sod again, right? By having new plants in place, it minimizes the chance or the possibility even that action would be taken. And so we think that that's important. We'd also will be evaluating adjusting the rebate amounts, potentially looking at lowering the rebate for projects where lawn is physically removed, meaning they take a sod cutter and cut it out, as opposed to doing something that's more sustainable. And so these tiered rebates would really reward customers that follow best management practices to complete projects in the most sustainable manner. And so again, staff will be doing an evaluation on this and will return to the board with these program considerations at a future date. In addition,
Can I
Yeah.
just, oh, I'm sorry. On the adjusting the rebate amounts, were you, you were just gonna go on the higher rebate for something that has a stormwater feature? Were you gonna say more about that?
I wasn't, because at this point, staff was going to do an evaluation to look at,
Yeah,
what's the cost for doing this? How much of a rebate? What's cost effective? Kind of where's that break point? What makes sense? What are others doing also? So we can kind of take all of that into consideration.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I
just
think
to-
that's good. The reason I'm mentioning it now is I think it's great that you're evaluating. I'd like to suggest that staff meet with the cities in the county, because we don't have responsibility. The water district is not jurisdictionally responsible for stormwater, but the cities in the county are. And there's a fairly, there's a growing, I'm talking to people, there's a fairly substantial growing interest in what can we be doing to capture stormwater, that's greener, that's distributed across communities. This may be an opportunity, again, I'm just suggesting that you have the conversations, an opportunity to work with our cities and counties that have those jurisdictional responsibilities and see if they would be interested in participating with us and helping to pay for a higher rebate. Because to the extent that there's a stormwater advantage that mitigates their stormwater requirement, there could be real benefits to them in participating with us on this.
absolutely. So that is the intent, right? To have that conversation.
Okay, great.
But also, right? So keeping the water on site, stormwater on site, the soil is a sponge. The soil is our best opportunity to maintain that water, which minimizes the need for additional irrigation. So
Yeah, and you want to
works
keep
both ways.
those, and you want to keep that water out of the sewers, as avoid flooding, avoid
Yep.
contaminants going into our creeks and streams and bays. So I think that could really be a win-win-win for everybody.
Staff is also proposing to retire the direct install sheet mulching program. We finally wrapped up all of the costs associated with that program, and it worked out to be $4.26 per square foot, which is $1 and a quarter higher than our current $3 rebate. And so recognizing that it was an appropriate program for drought response, right? To really help those customers take action. It is quite a bit more expensive than our standard rebate. And there's challenges associated with it. So like I mentioned, we will be bringing this back to the board for the proposed changes in March. Moving on to smart controller programs. So we have an existing $100 rebate, and we also have a direct distribution program with Ratio, which is a specific type of controller. The Ratio program has actually accounted for 80% of our participation during 2021. So, which makes a whole lot of sense, right? When you get a rebate, that means you have to make sure you get a qualifying model, you have to find it, right? You have to source it, go buy it yourself. Whereas Ratio, they have a great, online social media campaigns. It's really click and they mail it to you and there it is, right? So it really makes it turnkey. So it makes sense that we have such a high level of participation over the last year. You may recall that during the drought, while we offered the incentive, we really were not promoting this program, right? Because essentially customers would have had to override the smart aspect of the controller to adhere to our irrigation restrictions. We are now at a point where we can start letting all those customers who now have smart controllers know that they can go back to the smart controller setting, right? And they can actually allow that smart controller to decide when to water and how often to water due to our relaxing of those restrictions. The other incentive programs, just briefly, just so we have them, all wrapped up, is the hot water recirculating system rebate we brought back. Impressive 125 incentives were issued. Toilet rebate returned in the fall of last year. Pool covers, another one. We had a pool cover rebate of $50, 5 by 50, so $50 rebate incentive. And we probably had, 100 or so incentives over the course of that entire program. And just in the last few months, 6 months or so, we had almost 400. And then our high efficiency closed water rebate at $100 does continue to be an offering, longstanding program through the partnership. Wanted to touch on expenditures and drought incentives. So the FY22 budgeted rebates and incentives were at 581,000 due to the new programs and the drought response. We have expenditures of 1.2 million as of January. As I mentioned, we have about 200,000 square feet of turf that still needs to be processed upon approval, which we estimate to be about 600,000, and then a handful of other rebates as well that do continue to come in, which will equate to a total of 1.8 million we're estimating for the current fiscal year. Looking at the next fiscal year, FY23, the budgeted incentives is at 591,000.
Can I ask why? I mean, it looks like our expenditure was higher. I mean, I think there's a fairly strong board commitment to continuing with these programs. We've all spent a lot of time talking about how we're not going backwards. We are going to continue to want to build our supply resilience by decreasing demand for these, sorts of, water wasteful practices. Why wouldn't we budget higher given the participation we've seen from the community?
Yeah, I can. Thanks for the question. Yeah, of course, the board can decide on the budget through the budgetary process, and we can go as high as the board is interested in the funding supports. This is also designed to point out that we did fund the excess from the budget through the reserves that with the drought are largely depleted. So we are looking at some measure of caution, even continuing through this year with the current budget of where that cash is going to come from. So things are expected to get a bit tight, and we do have to collectively think about all of our priorities.
Ben, I was talking to Chuck about the conservation budget last week, and one of the things we discussed was putting a conservation fee in our billing program. It'd be somewhat similar to the capital maintenance fee. So it's just another mechanism to have the funds for conservation sort of on an ongoing basis, sort of baked into our budget. So just something for folks to think about right now.
Yeah, and Chuck has brought that up to me. In fact, what we do plan, that's one of the elements that we do plan to discuss with the board with the upcoming COSA and rate setting process as we think about going forward. And I think it is a very interesting idea. But regardless of what direction we do go, we do need to match our incentives with our budget dollars that we have. So we are going to really need to think about that, absolutely, with all the competing priorities that we have.
Yeah. And then one other thing, Carrie, on the stormwater aspect of it, are you familiar with McStop? Because I know that, there's sort of a countywide regulatory system that they administer, and then the other one are the flood zones. So I don't know if you've been in touch with like flood zone 9, and there's really should be a push to do softer, greener flood control. So if we could fold that into our program, I know Ross Valley would benefit in my area. So, and I'm sure the other districts as well.
Excellent. Sounds great. Thank you for those leads.
I have a question.
Yep.
I have a question about the money. Are we actually paying folks, or are we just crediting their bills?
We cut them checks.
Maybe, Ben, we could think about just crediting back the bill to, it's the same dollars, but it's not out of pocket, huh?
Yeah, well, It is the same dollars. I'm not sure. I think this has come up and finance looked at it and felt this would be an easier way to go than maybe programming changes, but we can take another look at it in terms of what's more efficient. But as you know, right, at the end of the day, it's kind of fungible wherever it comes from. It's a, direct cost.
Sure, but we could also spread it out and make it $10 a month, well, or something, or $120 a month or $50 or whatever it is, to spread out the cash flow.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Okay, moving on. So I wanted to include a slide on some program offerings that are resuming now that COVID is kind of slowing down. So classroom presentations were put on hold, almost 2 years ago now. And they will resume on March 1st for our grades 3rd through 12. We will offer Zoom presentations in the event that instructors or teachers don't want us to, they're not comfortable with having visitors, but we're finding that most and many schools are open, so that'll resume. And also our conservation assistance program will also relaunch on March 1st. We have been doing phone consultations throughout COVID. Staff has learned that those have been quite effective, but there's still some in-person site visits that are useful and customers prefer. And so we want to bring that back as well. So making sure that the board's aware of those programmatic changes. So moving into water use statistics, we've had some interest from members of the public and others on a breakdown of water use by sector. Our urban water management plan, our 2020 urban water management plan, provides 10 years of this data up through 2020. And so I wanted to have a slide on our 2021 use by sector. You can see here that 75% of our demands are from either single family or multifamily.
Can you go back for a second, Carrie?
Of course.
Because that was just a little fast. Generally, there's a bigger slice for leaks. I'm sort of surprised that I'm not seeing that here. Not that we want to have leaks. I'm just saying.
Yes, no, so this is consumption, right? So this isn't compared. This is not production.
Okay.
Which would the difference between consumption and production would be a component of that would be leaks. So this is just delivered water to our customers.
Got it. And I think you're right. I think we have heard a lot of interest in this kind of data being on the website. So if I could ask that we could, so this is great. This is really readable and very clear. Could we provide this as well as the production? Because I do think it's important for people to, see that there are those other, there is that distinction, as you say, between production and consumption. So if we could put that up on the website in some prominent place, I think that'd be great.
I have a question. The 5% irrigation, jumps out at me. That's there's something misleading here. I assume that a significant part of the 60% single family is going to be irrigation. I presume part of the 10% commercial is going to be irrigation. What is that 5% irrigation?
Yeah, the irrigation is our dedicated irrigation meters. So meters that are specific to irrigation. Okay. And you're absolutely correct. So part of multifamily, part of single family, part of commercial, and even part of institutional would have potentially some demands that are irrigation that are not parsed out in this breakdown.
Right.
We should probably, in our posting this on the website, as Director Kohler suggested, clarify what that means, because it does kind of jump out a bit.
Yeah. You know what also useful would be to do another one. We're just going to make you do more and more pie charts that takes this and kind of recalculate it as what's indoor use versus what's outdoor use. I think people really want to know that, because Jack's exactly right. Each of these different slices has both indoor and outdoor components. So I think people would be really interested in knowing how much of this total delivered water is indoor versus outdoor.
And again, we're all pie chart experts. I think that would be really great. I wonder if you could just shade like a percentage of that 60% and the commercial 10% as estimated, outdoor use or something like that, so that people could see the percentage of that 60 or something that is indoor versus outdoor. something like that. But I think explaining that would be really helpful for folks. And production is kind of a tricky thing for people to understand the difference between production and use. So I'm sure you'll give some thought to that, explaining that in simple terms for folks so that people can understand, the difference and why we're providing it.
Ben, a suggestion for that irrigation explanation is just say that irrigation meters, just expand the title. I think Monty has a great idea. I don't know that you really need to shade it. I think just a line in there will do it, just dividing up the pie chart. And I wouldn't worry about the supply versus the demand. The people are interested in what the demand is. Just use it, keep it simple. Just use this chart. Don't try to make it fancier, more information about leaks and all that. Forget about that. Just talk about the metered water and the sales. This is useful to give a quick look at that.
All good comments. We will revise, take those into consideration, and
I think you're
work
getting
with
mixed.
Adrian.
I think you're getting mixed direction on leaks. Larry and I can have an offline conversation within the constructs of the Brown Act, of course, about leaks. I do get a lot of questions about it. And so I do think we should say something about it. There are going to be people who dig in and see that there are discrepancies. So one way or another, we need to account for leaks and what we talk about how our water is used.
The problem is, Cynthia, it isn't leaks. It's unaccounted for water. It's
Yes,
the difference
I was just-
between the
right.
meters, So be careful in your choice of words there. Just
All
a
right.
suggestion.
You're right. I was just using shorthand, but you're correct.
Sure.
Okay. Moving on, looking at per capita water use. So we've seen this graph before. This is 2020 data looking at a handful of utilities across the state. And we were in kind of middle of the road, right, back in 2020. We took a look at our 2021.
Can you go back?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to that?
Of course.
Who's the best? Who's the best? The one on the far left.
San Gabriel Valley Water Company.
Oh, that's highly suspicious. I mean, they're right in the middle. They're right in the middle of San Fernando Valley. It's hard to believe.
Regionally, the lowest is Santa Cruz, city of Santa Cruz.
Well, that's different. Santa Cruz takes this serious. They have a real problem because of water supply. Who's the number two? Who's the next one after San Gabriel?
Golden State Water Company, Florence Graham.
That's Sacramento, I think, huh?
I'm not sure.
Director Russell, as you know, per capita pulls in everything. So if you have, for example, large industries, where your per capita may be higher if you don't. So, but when you get this kind of data set, some of that variability is normalized, and it just gives, right, it's not precise, of course, but it gives a rough picture of, okay, we're sort of statewide in the middle of the pack, but this is always going to be imperfect.
Right.
Of course, but what you're talking about, Ben, is on the far right. That's the ones that the high consumption per capita.
Right.
On the far left, the reason I asked is that obviously, if these people are that successful, we should be talking to them about what they're doing. That was my point of bringing it up.
I agree with you there, and we have an enormous amount to learn from Santa Cruz in particular. I just want to be, I don't want to cut anybody off, but I want to be really careful about time. I have a hard stop just before 11, and I think others do as well. And we do have the whole comms piece, so I just want to make sure we get through this.
Let me move on. So looking at system-wide per capita water use, so this is district per capita starting back in 2000. We ran the numbers for 2021, and we are at 101 GPCD. Again, this is system-wide, not residential GPCD, system-wide. And this is down from 124, which is what we were at where we were at in 2020. So definitely can see the impacts of drought response there. Taking a look a little bit deeper at our residential indoor water use by county. Again, we've seen this slide before. This was from Q3 of 2021. We were at 34.3 residential gallons per person per day. And so we took a closer look at last quarter, right? Our most recent Flume data. This is all, of course, these last two slides are from Flume. The average had been 34.3, and we continue to see it drop to 31.3. And interesting enough, here's Thanksgiving, right? That blip up for demands, and then also Christmas, right? The folks traveling and having company, et cetera.
So to be clear, the last two slides are from Flume, which means this is not necessarily representative of the county. If you go back to that one slide. I mean, not necessarily representative of our service area, right? This is only data from people who have Flume devices who are, we've seen people who have Flume devices are generally conserving more. So this is, I just want to be very clear as a matter of the public record. You're not saying that that is that 34.3 gallons of water per person per day is what the district staff is currently saying is what you think people are using across the service area.
You know, we found that many of our, it's a representative of the Flume users, but we did find during the drought that many of those Flume users were not necessarily our lowest water users. They weren't our most conserving users. And so I think it may be more representative than not. So more to come on this, more to come.
Okay, thanks.
All right, jumping into long-term initiatives. So I wanted to start with the statewide water efficiency framework. So this is legislation that was passed back in 2018, where the state is assigning water use objectives for each of these 4 categories. And the objectives, well, they'll add all these water use objectives up, and that will be our district's water use target. We'll be responsible for annually reporting our system production in comparison to the target to maintain compliance with the state. There's been, since 2018, there's been a number of workshops and, you know, kind of back and forth between water utilities and the state in establishing these water use objectives. The majority of the work so far has come through the residential indoor water use objective. The legislation actually stated in 2020, 55 GPCD would be the number. And then by 2030, it would drop down to 50. There's been legislation that was not adopted, but also state board staff is recommending that the residential indoor GPCD go from 55, which is where it currently is, down to 42 in 2030. So we're continuing to see a ratcheting. What we're doing is, as each one of these one of these objectives, the methodology is released by the state, staff does an evaluation to determine how it would impact us and whether or not we would be able to maintain compliance. At this point, we only have heard from the state on any level of detail on the residential outdoor and the water loss, both of which it looks to be like we would maintain compliance. The outdoor objective and the commercial, industrial, and institutional standards and performance measures is still underway. The state is anticipating having their rulemaking process start, quote unquote, soon. But again, staff will continue to track this and we will report back to the board once the final rulemaking is complete and we have a better understanding of the impacts on our system for compliance with this regulation. Commercial non-functional turf prohibition. So we had a discussion last night at the board meeting on this. This slide was already created. So just to reiterate the direction that was received, we will develop a new code to address, to prevent the installation of new commercial non-functional turf in developments and new commercial developments. And as far as existing commercial non-functional turf, we will target market our incentive programs to those folks and track participation and track how that's going and report back to the board on that. I do want to note that the cost of unbudgeted incentives, if we were able to replace all of the commercial non-functional turf within the service area through our incentive program at $3 a square foot, it would be $4.5 million.
I have a comment, Carrie.
Sure.
I took and noticed your numbers on the residential turf removal. Obviously, it's a much more productive place to mine than this area, because 1% of our customers, you had 570 customers, or 527 or something like that, removed 570,000 square feet. So 1% of our customers were able to remove 1/6 of the total commercial non-functional turf. So it's a very productive program, the one for removing turf at the homes. Just FYI, because you're getting a much bigger bang for the buck, and there's much more bucks to gather. There's much more square footage in the homes than there is in this. Not that this isn't a good idea. It's that the other one, I think, is where the action is, because like I say, you've already pulled out 570,000 square feet from just 1% of our customers.
Participation, right? Higher level of participation in the residential sector I think, higher opportunity for water savings in this non-functional turf area. So we'll offer it and make it available to our customers, and hope that they take us up on those opportunities.
And one more quick comment. I have been unable to locate 1.1 gallon per flush toilets. So if you, I've got the list and I've looked at that. I can't find anybody selling them.
Okay.
So if you can point me to that, I would appreciate it, because I'm
Sure
ready
thing.
to do it. But
We will.
I haven't found them.
On it. We'll send you an
Thanks.
email.
And then Carrie, my question, if you could go back,
Yeah.
the 4.5 million in unbudgeted incentives, is that because we spent a lot of time last night making the very clear distinction between a restriction on new non-functional turf, which is easy, relatively easy. So are these unbudgeted incentives, is that exclusively for retrofits, or are you including?
Exclusively for retrofits of existing.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And when you have a chance, if you could provide us with what that represents in terms of the square footage that you've estimated we have. I don't want to take up your time now to do that.
Yeah, it was in the staff report from last night. I could pull the number as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
146.
Oh,
acre
thank
feet.
you.
Thank you. Okay, water efficiency master plan. I know you've been hearing about this for well over a year. The drought kind of distracted us, and we had set it aside, but we're back at it. And so I just wanted to give an update. So we'll be evaluating the service area demands by sector. So not just the sector, we looked at that pie chart, but actually diving into, within commercial, what various types of sectors is the state using for the framework to determine compliance, and where are there opportunities, and what do demands look like within kind of that state framework as well, not just our generalized, meter customer breakdown. We'll then evaluate program participation. So long-term historic program participation, but also insights from the drought. Who participated in their program? Where were they located? Where was their interest, et cetera. That will lead to an evaluation of our conservation program potential, which would be recommendations on where there's the biggest opportunity for water savings. The document will consider sample conservation targets, right? So if we did want to establish a target of, say, 95 gallons per person per day, what would it take? What would be the level of investment? What type of programs would we need to get there? And it'll be a sample, so to kind of help inform the discussion as we consider moving towards targets. And finally, it'll end up with a list of recommendations for policy, incentive, community engagement, and other data gaps, right? Where do we need more information so we can make informed decisions moving forward? The timing for this final report will be June of 2022. Staff is also working on informational water budgets. Again, this is an item that the board has seen before, but want to recognize that there is progress being made. We're looking at both indoor and outdoor components with the goal of establishing a reasonable target so that customers can compare their actual water use to this target. Want to make sure that it aligns with the state's framework, again, for indoor gallons per person per day. And then also, so what we're essentially doing is evaluating the methodologies with the consultant to say, okay, if we know the landscape area or we know lot size, what makes sense for a methodology for the outdoor component as well. An AMI update. We're currently in phase 1 which is the implementation plan. We have a consultant on board to develop this implementation plan. The current status is listed there as a system assessment. We'll be then moving into financial analysis, the business process impact assessment, looking at technologies and an AMI deployment roadmap. So what makes the most sense for our service area based on current meter that we have on meter stock that we have, and what hardware and software makes the most sense for us. That implementation plan should be finalized in June of 2022, and that will tee up phase 2 and 3, which would be a RFP and then installation of AMI. Moving on to some grant funding, good news, right? We received Prop 1 Bay Area IRWIMP grant. The total funding is just over $200,000, and there's a 50% match. This funding is allotted towards reimbursement for the Flume devices that were installed during the drought. And there's also a component around water loss, specifically a real loss component analysis. So real loss component analysis looks at leakage from main breaks, both background reported and unreported leaks. And this process will assist the district in completing the state board's real loss performance target model within each of these components: background, unreported, and reported leaks. It will result in recommendations for cost-effective loss recovery efforts that the district could choose to take. And it'll also provide recommendations for additional data collection and management improvements so that we can go back and rerun the model with better information to provide, updated recommendations for loss recovery efforts moving forward. This item will be brought to the board on March 1st for approval of the MOU with East Maine Mud, who is the pass-through agency for receiving the grant funding. So as a snapshot of kind of what we've covered, where we've been, where we're going, looking at a timeline here of board actions, milestones, and regulatory deadlines. You can see over the next few months, many of the items that I just went through, kind of where we see them teeing up. And then ultimately, going a couple of years out with the state reporting. And finally, wrapping up with next steps. Staff does intend to return to the board with some turf program evaluation and some recommended changes to that program. We will utilize the findings from the Water Efficiency Master Plan to inform programmatic changes, any new initiatives, and then also development of water use targets. Again, slide was developed prior to last night. We will develop a single-pronged approach to commercial non-functional turf prohibitions focused in on the new connections and landscape plan review process, and then outreach to our non-functional turf customers. Finalizing the AMI implementation plan will occur as well. And then of course, continue to provide conservation resources, incentives, with consideration of budget limitations as mentioned in prior discussions. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
It's 164 acre feet, not 146.
Thank you for being our research on that. I do want to take board comments, but it's already 10:17 and we have the whole other presentation. So any comments in addition to the ones we had, because we do have to go also to public comment. Okay, any public comments?
Yes, there are three. Paul Duder, then Phil Sauter, please. Mr. Duder.
Hi, I was just, thanks for the presentation. I think it would be more helpful for me if in the presentation we included the amount of gallons that we expected to save from some of these programs. The programs seem very, good to me, and I like reading about them, but I'm always curious about how many gallons of water we're going to save. For example, in the non-functional turf program, sounds great. How much will it save? Can we include that information in these presentations? For me, it would help me.
I'll just say very quickly, I agree. The challenge is that these aren't one-time things, right? These are savings that go on. It's not just we've taken out this non-functional turf and it's a one-time thing. It's what's your time frame? And so that's why the savings are challenging to estimate with perfect accuracy. But Carrie, do you want to speak more to that? Because I know that's a challenge. Okay, next comment then.
Phil Sauter, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. I didn't know about this meeting even until last night, and I'm so grateful. It's exactly what I hoped it would be. I also realized that a lot of the questions that I've been asking in the last few board meetings are really answered with this kind of data and these kinds of presentations. So I want to thank you for not rolling your eyes as I've asked all this stuff that you are clearly on top of. I'm going to try to attend more of these meetings. I've taken screenshots of the presentation and I'm going to go back and try to really get my arms around this. I do second the Mr. Duder's question as to a way to try to look at these programs and see if we can measure some kind of efficacy, what kind of return are we getting. My second or my question is with regard to Flume. It looks like they're reporting out some aggregate data from various water districts across the country. I'm wondering if it would be possible to get more granular data from participating users so the water district can really peer into people who are using Flume and see what's happening on a day by day or hour by hour basis if we choose to get into that level of granularity. And third, I'm going to keep, I think, being an advocate for getting a Flume device into the hands of every district customer. I think going forward that the conservation goals that we're going to have are going to require a level of information for everyone to have to make decisions and really figure out how we start meeting some of these requirements for water usage, which I think are going to get more and more hard to achieve over time. I would love to have just millions of pieces of data that we can analyze and see what works. And I think that Flume is the source of that data. I'd like to see the best informed constituency in the whole country in Marin County, people really knowing what they're doing and the district knowing what they're doing and being able to come up with programs that really get us down to a 40% long-term conservation goal. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want
to briefly note, screenshots, Mr. Sauter, aren't needed. All of our presentations are posted, and you may find rich information, and I suspect you will in prior Communication Conservation Committee meetings as well that are all posted.
Thank you. The next two speakers, Ed and then James Krajewski. Ed, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I would just want to comment on the estimated cost of the non-functional turf program being $4.5 million. A month or so ago, I think it was estimated at a $10 million program, and President Russell commented on that as being a very high number, he thought. So I'm a little confused about which number is right. I'd also like to say, I believe that presentation that brought out that comment, it did include estimates of the savings from the various components of it. So I think you do have that data there. It is available, and if people just knew where to look for it in a prior recording, they could find it. I think that was very well laid out. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Mr. Krajewski, please.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to comment about the need for detail on some of these things. The chart, for example, the pie chart that was presented is excellent, but what's needed are more explanations for each of those pieces of the pie, so to speak, and breakdowns of detail. For example, where do golf course watering fit in that pie chart? And something I'm still puzzled about is San Quentin water use. Where does that fit in that pie chart in terms of some per capita use, or is it a business, or I don't know. So it's those kinds of questions that come up regularly that need to be fleshed out so that we can all look at these data. And then the other thing, the other problem that exists is these charts then get buried in various reports or various meeting reports. So you can't find them because they're scattered all about the website, or it takes hours to find them. So in terms of efficiency, that would be great if you could put these all in one place and add a bit more detail and explanation for those things. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, then I think we can go on to the next item unless there's anything else, which is the communications update.
Good morning, Board of Directors. I'm Adrienne Mertens, Communications Public Affairs Manager. And today I will be covering our latest updates on outreach activities. Next slide, please, Terry. So most of my update is going to focus on our plans for drought resiliency outreach and engagement. For the last year, obviously, outreach work has been dedicated to communicating to our customers about the dire drought emergency, the related water rules, and other ways to achieve critical water savings. And now that the district's able to begin to move past those immediate drought emergency messages, thanks to the status of our reservoirs, we're refocusing our communication efforts to align with the district's drought resiliency plans. And so I'll be covering outreach and engagement plans for both our long-term water supply as well as conservation, as those efforts will be happening in tandem. Next slide, please, Terry. So first, we are kicking off communications about the water supply assessment work. We'll be communicating about this in a variety of ways to our customers, but I did want to highlight the messages that we're going to be sure to convey through all of the communications we do, including this is an approach similar to the efforts that were undertaken after the drought of the 70s. This is going to work on all of that previous good water supply study work that's been done by the district, and that we'll be exploring multiple options for how to meet our long-term commitment for drought resiliency. And then also we want to be sure that the public knows that this is going to be a very open process and we'll be taking them along. And I'll get into that more in our next slide. So we are preparing for—
Adrienne, I'm sorry, can I ask real quick? Could you go back just for a second? I think I didn't quite get why is it a key message to say it's the same kind of effort as after the drought of the 70s? Like why do you feel that that's beneficial as a message? It would seem to me, I mean, I certainly agree with your second bullet. We want to make the point that, this is not a new thing that we've done, we've spent, many, many years planning for resilience in many different ways, but I'm curious about that first bullet point as a key message.
Sure, I think the purpose is to communicate that this isn't the first time where we've dealt with changing climate conditions. We suffered severe drought in the 70s and went through this process of looking at options and exploring ways to improve our water supply. And we took several actions to do that. And so we're following a similar model and looking to build on our water supply going forward.
Yeah. Okay, I think we need to work on that as a key message. I think that's at least I think that's the point of your second bullet. I think we need to be saying something. I think one of the key messages needs to be talking about, I agree we should have 3 key messages. I think that's right. You don't want to have more than that. But I think we want to be emphasizing what's new here. And that is that we are in a climate changing world that means that the past is no longer prologue. But anyway, I don't want to belabor it now, but I think we need to work on these first 2 bullet points and separate them a little bit more. And I think create an initial kind of a top line new message that builds in the concept of the climate changing situation in which we're in.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think that part of what's an important part of the message that's missing is the begin with the end in mind, which is what the point of this is to achieve a water supply resiliency that takes into account our changing climate, our changing circumstances. So I just feel like that a key message ought to be that we're taking the steps necessary to identify what we need to do to have a safe and resilient water supply.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I will say, I think that in the communications that we have begun to put out and that we're developing, that does come across. And I think that was a mistake that it was left off of this list, but I'll make sure that it's included in our core message plan. So thank you.
So that is to say, climate change will be sort of folded into the messaging.
Yeah, correct.
And I think hearkening back to the 70s is not a bad idea. I think that kind of, what would you call it? Historic reference, I think tends to give people a feeling of solidarity that we've been through this, we've done it. And this is, like you said, this is not completely a new thing, and we succeeded before, and it kind of sets a foundation for going forward. So I like that reference because it's a reference to success.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Larry. I just think that I guess what I'm saying is I would fold the first 2 bullets into 1 bullet, and there should be a new first bullet that talks about climate resilience and Yeah, and to Monty's point, where we want to end. So I don't object to the reference to the 70s per se. I just object to it being the way it's phrased as its own standalone key message separate from the second.
Okay.
All great feedback. We'll work on refining those key messages. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Terry. Okay, so for our virtual community workshop series, which is going to happen as we progress through the water supply assessment, the planning for those is underway. We have chosen March 9th from 5 to 7 p.m. as the first virtual meeting date. Right now, that's just to save the date, but in the next week, we hope to have more details put together to actually put out the official invitations and announcements. But to really kick off our communication to the public about the assessment process, I'm pleased to say that we have a letter to our community that was signed by President Russell on behalf of the district, published in the Marin IJ as a full page ad, and it introduces our plans and also includes an actual save the date at the bottom for that first community workshop. And that's a screenshot there, the larger file behind the blue box of the letter. And then the save the date actually is what appears below it in the IJ ad. And we'll also be pushing that letter out in a number of other places. We are publishing it in our e-news as the future article that'll go out tomorrow to 20,000 subscribers. We're pushing it on our social media channels. It's published to our website homepage, and we'll continue to reference it where we can. And then because a letter is simply not enough to communicate to all of our customers, we will continue to do other forms of communication about our plans using some sort of visual storytelling. We're working on ideas around a video slideshow that can kind of show in pictures and short captions what our plans are and the purpose of those and how we expect to move forward through the process. Next slide, please. Since this is a 5-month process, the water supply assessment, we'll be doing a lot more promotion leading up to each of the workshops. We plan to space them about a month or so apart, and we'll be doing print advertising, radio PSAs, outreach across all of our digital channels, and cross promotion through our county and city and towns public information partners to help get the word out about those opportunities to participate in the process. And then important updates about the assessment and also promotion of each community workshop will be housed on our water supply landing page that we've created. And we're actually working this week to transform that to really capture the overall assessment and not just individual water supply projects that we've been looking at. So it'll have more information on what that process is and why we're doing it. It'll also include the scope of work that I believe it was President Russell had requested be posted online. We will be putting that on this page, the scope of work that our consultant that is helping to manage the assessment will be working under. Next slide, please. All right, so on the other side, our conservation drought resiliency focus, we want to continue to educate and reinforce to the community the importance of continuing water efficient practices where possible. And I think I captured some of what we were talking about in the other key messages here, hopefully. But really, these are what we hope to communicate through our outreach to residents around conservation. We're no longer facing an imminent water shortage. That's the message we've been telling them for months, that we were in an urgent water crisis. We're out of that, but the effects of climate change will continue to threaten our water supply. And so, we're going to continue to ask them to use water efficient practices, but we want them to know that while we're doing that, we are also working on these water supply efforts. And so everyone must do their part to lessen the impacts of future droughts. The district obviously leading the water supply effort. And then we will be asking our community to continue to conserve or to save water where possible. And part of that message will also be that we're committed to providing the tools and the programs and the policies to provide customers with the path to save. Next slide, please. So our upcoming outreach around this effort, I'm really excited about this project. We have been working on a gardening resources digital library, and we expect to publish this later today. The URL for that will be marinwater.org/watersmartgardening. And obviously, the board voted last night to lift irrigation restrictions, allowing for up to twice a week watering. As Carrie mentioned, we have been preparing in advance for that potential action so that once it happened, we could engage with customers right away while they're initiating replanting plans and thinking about their yards and watering needs. So we can make sure that they're able to do that with water saving practices in mind. And so really this gardening resource library consists of content that was curated by our conservation team. It has really great videos, booklets, design templates that customers can use to help them with their yards. All of that content is centralized in one location at that URL, and it's categorized by topics to make it useful and easy for customers to navigate. And those topics will cover everything from irrigation to water-wise plant selection, fire-safe landscape design, sheet mulching, and other resources. We're also going to list our own, the district's gardening and irrigation related rebate programs within this library as well. And so we do have a press release planned to go out this afternoon announcing the board's action last night to lift the irrigation restriction, and we'll be introducing this resource in that press release. And then once published, our next focus is getting the word out about the resource and some of the other programs that Carrie covered today. So I mentioned the press release, but we're also going to be working on direct mailers and bill inserts. This will be a focal point of our talking points as we participate in community events through outreach booth opportunities this spring. We'll be doing paid advertising and social media. And then also we're looking at some stakeholder partnerships where staff can collaborate with our local nurseries or hardware and home improvement stores on the potential to provide some sort of wrap card or takeaway piece at the checkout stand so that customers can become aware of this resource that's available to help them with their water smart gardening guidance. And then we'll also be coordinating with other cities and towns to ask for their help in promoting the tool as appropriate in their newsletters and social media channels. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Can you go? There you go. Thank you. So focusing now on engagement around our conservation, our drought resiliency conservation efforts. There's a number of topics that Carrie did mention that we would like to get input on for different programs and policy needs. That includes establishment of our water use targets, our residential landscape restrictions, including considerations for non-functional turf, reach code and new connection requirements, and implementation of future drought restrictions. And to gather this input, originally we were exploring the potential of forming a community advisory committee where members would be appointed by the board and would commit monthly, their time monthly over the next year. However, after additional consideration, staff is now proposing that we actually shift this format to instead be a community engagement workshop series. And there's a few reasons for that. This would be more consistent with the engagement process that we are implementing for the water supply assessment that's happening at the same time. It allows us to broaden our customer participation on a topic where we know there's vastly different needs and perspectives. And it'll allow us to utilize a range of input gathering techniques as well. And then it would also tighten up our timing to gather input. And so we would, if this moves forward, look to plan our first meeting for early April, our community engagement workshop. Next slide, please. And so that's all on that. I didn't know if there's any comments before I kind of go on to some a couple other efforts that we're working on.
Other than to say, I think it's all good. Those are all great options. Is the board comfortable letting Adrian continue? We've only got about 20 more minutes here.
Yeah, and my next slides are pretty brief.
Okay.
All right. So I did want to touch on a few other outreach activities that have been going on or that are upcoming, just because we'll be out in the community talking about them and want you to be aware. We have relaunched our volunteer opportunities that were dormant during COVID, a number of different workshops and programs. And so it's been great to see those reinvigorated and participation start back up. So we will be continuing to promote all of those efforts. We do have a separate volunteer newsletter that was started up just a few months ago and is continuing. We just pushed out the February issue last week, which has kind of the first swath of volunteer opportunities in the new year. And then we also are continuing to provide updates on our salmon spawning activity. This is a very popular topic, is getting a lot of traction. We've actually decided to turn this into more of a blog that we host ongoing updates on our website on. We get really great field notes from our staff. And so we have this interesting idea of just kind of making this something that's done consistently that we can point media to. We get a lot of requests about that. And so we'll have more to share on that soon. And then also, as we're looking forward, it's approaching wildfire season, even preparations leading up to that, we will be doing more work to talk about our watershed wildfire resilience and forest health education, and forest health, excuse me, and we'll be doing education and outreach around that. Obviously, our staff, as weather conditions permit, will be gearing up for prescribed burns, and we want our community to understand the benefits of why we do that and also what to expect on days when that may be happening. And so we will be doing more outreach on that. This post here was a recent social media post we did just to talk a little bit about that, but we'll be getting into more specifics over the next several weeks. Next slide, please. And then I did want to give just an update on some of our PIO, our public information analytics. Terry, next slide. So here's just a snapshot of our website traffic. We just started this from January 1 up until yesterday to track where our most viewed pages are. Consistently, our Water Watch page is our most frequently viewed, as well as our Marin Water homepage. We are doing some work, if I could just note, on our homepage to restructure things as we're kind of taking this more drought resilience outreach focus moving forward. We want to reflect that on the entry point of our website. And so we're working on remapping what that looks like and to help customers be able to best navigate it as we come out of kind of the urgent drought emergency. And then just another look at new users by page, pretty consistent actually with our most viewed pages. Next slide, please, Terry. And then our social.
Before you leave the website, super quick, I've been getting a few complaints about the billing page. So I don't want to take time now, but I just want to mark that for you that apparently that's wildly out of date. I've gotten about, I don't know, 8 or 9 complaints about it recently. So if we could just have that as something for us to discuss at a later meeting and what we can do to, because I think that's a separate thing, but it's just part of the website. And it's interesting that people are not using the billing page that much, or at least as much as other things. I mean, this is great. This is terrific. But I do want to make sure that we talk about how to make that billing page more useful and available for people.
That would be great. And also, if you get any emails about that too, as I'm learning about all the different areas of the district, it would be really helpful if there's anything that you're able to share with me, just so I can understand the customer experience too. Okay, next slide, Terry. All right, so for social media engagement, Twitter continues to be our most successful platform. I've also observed that Twitter is often where we get a lot of our media inquiries from. So it's good to know that our reporters are following us there to track what's happening with the water district. And then I just have some trends on the growth of our Instagram and Twitter followings. Instagram is a fairly new platform for the district, and so we're continuing to grow in that area. It's very visually focused, and we're very lucky to have a talented photographer on our comms team, and we hope to put his skills to more use to continue to grow in that area and help with our visual storytelling around some of our messages. Next slide, Terry. All right, and then finally, our monthly e-news open rates. So we are successfully delivering to 20,814 email recipients as of the last e-news that went out beginning of January. As I said, we're gearing up to send out February's e-news tomorrow. And I just want to note that we have a 49% open rate, which is a really, really great number. I was impressed when I first came on board and was looking at our analytics, especially around this. That is a very high number for a public agency, industry standards, 32%. And so this is an area that I do want to continue to grow our subscription list in, especially as we're working on these two different parallel community engagement oriented focuses the next several months. Having this frequent way, bill inserts are good, but it's bi-monthly and the information becomes stagnant quickly. Whereas e-news, we can have much more timely information shared with our readership. And we can also get analytics on which articles they're clicking on, what seems to be of most interest to them, and how many people are actually looking at the content that we produce and send out. So that is an area where we'll be looking to do more promotion to try to enhance the subscription list. And that wraps up my update, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. That was great. It's just before the hour, and I know we have some public comments. Can we go to board comments very quickly if we have any? Because I want to be sure we get to these public comments. Thank you, everybody. Terry, public comments?
Yes, there are two, Paul Duder and then Bill Sauter. Mr. Duder.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment about the public outreach on plants. What I have noticed is there's a little bit of a disconnect. People don't understand, or at least, they don't think about it that much, that the way it works here with our native plants is that they go dormant in the summer. When they don't get water, they go dormant. And I have a lot of friends that have a lot of native plants, but they water their plants all year long. They water their plants in the summer because native plants look better. They flower when you water them. So it's basically what they do is they plant native plants and they like the springtime look of the native plants all year long. And so instead of stopping watering in the summer, which would be normal for those plants, they just keep on watering them so they continue to flower. So part of the outreach is not just planting native plants, but also stop watering them in the summer, let them go dormant. It'll save water. It's not as pretty as it would be otherwise, but this is the way it is in our region. Things go dormant in the summer. We have to be happy with that dormant look during the summertime. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sauter.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think that history is really a good communication point if you can dumb it down. Because what Marin has accomplished, what consumers have accomplished over the last decade or so has really been kind of outstanding. I remember when we were working on that Pine Mountain Tunnel water tank, that 10 million gallon water tank, the district at that time was basing their storage needs on the use of 41 million gallons a day for summer usage, which turns out to be per capita about 205 gallons per day, which is a huge amount of water when you think about what we're using today. That 25 million gallons a day would have given us about, I think, a little over 2 years worth of storage. It's 28,000 acre feet. When you look at the goal of 95 gallons per day, which we're talking about now, that's 19 million gallons a day. That's 21,000 acre feet, and that gives us our 2.5 to 3 years. If we ever decided we wanted to go for a goal of 75 gallons per day per capita, we'd be talking 15 million gallons a day or 17,000 acre feet, and that would give us a 4 to 5 year supply without bringing in any outside water from other areas. So I think those kinds of numbers, I mean, if you can keep repeating that and getting that history in front of people and talking in terms of gallons per day and converting that into the years of supply that we have during these upcoming drought years, I think that's a really good message, and repeated over and over again. I think people could get it into their heads that if we can achieve some of these goals, we're really talking about water security that's 50 to 100% better than we had a year ago or 10 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Mr. James Krajewski.
Hi, thanks again. I think one of the confusing things about the public messages comes about because there often is a lack of detail in the public messaging. It's just more like there's a drought, everybody's got to save gobs and gobs of water. But I think you need details like how much water should individual households use, how much is okay for outdoor, how much is okay for indoor, and to give people specific goals. I thought, for example, that discussion last night about whether water outdoor use should be limited to 2 days a week or 3 days a week was more than a little bit bizarre because it was such a mixed message. It's like telling somebody who's running out of money and their accountant comes in and says, well, you can only spend money 2 days a week. Or another accountant says, well, you can spend money 3 days a week, without saying how much money you can spend, because 2 days a week you can water for hours and hours and waste far more water than if you watered every day. So what's missing in all of this is the details, and it ends up just being micromanagement, whether you can water 2 days or 3 days or something. And it's a very bizarre mixed message that doesn't help people to understand this is what you ought to aim for out there. And so I would suggest that more and more detail in all of this, and that's what's often lacking so that people can find that. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. We have a couple of minutes. We didn't have any action items today. These were really important and very valuable staff updates. So I just want to make sure that the board, if there's any further comments from the board, I just want to thank the staff for these very, very useful presentations. And I want to thank the members of the public who took the time to participate and share their views with us. And
I just want to say Phil's comments resonated with me, and and I know they're based on empirical data, based on comparing actual daily use, because I was somewhat involved with that in the most recent iteration of the Pine Mountain tank replacement, and we've had that comment throughout our deliberations since we announced the drought emergency. Can we set per person goals? And I know, we've had conversations about it sort of continuing, and it does seem like it would be a really good thing if we could kind of put that out as a message, if we could come up with some reasonable goal number for folks, just not to say that it restricts their use or micromanages their use, but just gives them kind of a better idea and a clearer idea what we're aiming for. So anyway, I did think his comments were spot on. So
Director Bregman, we are moving in that direction. Carrie indicated, but as part of her master planning effort and the engagement with the community, we are planning to get there within the next few months.
good,
Working with the board, of course.
good. I think it would be really helpful for folks.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, seeing no other no other people wanting to speak, I think we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.